That's when everybody was pissed off. That's when I didn't want a manager anymore. When I didn't want somebody taking 20% out of my check and I still pay all the bills anymore. When I went...
There is a very specific moment when confidence stops sounding like confidence and starts sounding like defense. It's subtle. Most people miss it. But once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's not in the words themselves. It's in the repetition. I don't need anything. I don't want money. I'm not asking for child support. I pay for everything. Myself. I've always taken care of my own responsibilities. On the surface, those statements sound empowering. They sound like independence. They sound like strength. And to be clear, Claressa Shields is accomplished. Her success is earned. Her discipline is real. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Truly secure independence doesn't need to be announced this often. It doesn't need defending. It doesn't need clarification. It doesn't need repetition. It simply exists. So the real question isn't whether Claressa Shields is strong. The real question is, why does this strength need to be explained so loudly, so publicly, and so repeatedly? Because statements like these don't appear in a vacuum. They appear when another story is already circulating. Explanation is never R&D, and people don't wake up one day and randomly decide to say, I don't need child support. I don't rely on anyone. I don't want anything from a man. Those statements answer a question no one asked, unless people were already asking. That's the first. Pattern. Not guilt. Not wrongdoing. But narrative correction. When someone repeatedly emphasizes independence, it often means an assumption has formed, a rumor is gaining traction, or a perception feels threatening, and perception, once set, is very hard to reverse. So what perception needed correcting here? That's where the silence on the other side becomes critical. Because while Claressa Shields is speaking, explaining, clarifying, asserting, Papoose says nothing. And silence, especially in moments like this, is never neutral. Emotion without defining. Listen closely to the emotional tone. Support is praised. Connection is emphasized. Affection is described warmly. Language leans personal, not professional. But something is missing. Definition. There is no clear label, clear timeline, clear public boundary, clear explanation of overlap or transition, just emotion floating without structure. That imbalance matters. Because emotion without definition creates vulnerability, and silence without definition creates power. When one person speaks emotionally and the other remains undefined, the dynamic shifts immediately. The speaker becomes exposed. The silent party becomes protected. And protection, when sustained, becomes advantage. Silence is not confusion, it's POSITO. People love to excuse silence as maturity. He's private. He doesn't like drama. He doesn't owe the public anything. But silence in public controversy is rarely accidental, especially when your name is being referenced, your situation is being explained by someone else. Your silence allows another person to speak on your behalf at that point. Silence stops being privacy. It becomes strategy. By saying nothing, Papoose avoids denial, confirmation, accountability, commitment. He doesn't have to correct the narrative. He doesn't have to contradict anyone. He doesn't have to explain timing or context. Simply lets things exist. And existence without correction creates assumption. Assumption is powerful because assumption carries emotional weight without requiring responsibility. Timeline starts to be indie at first. The public version of events is simple. A brief interaction. A fan moment. A compliment. Harmless. That later details emerge that quietly complicate that framing. Private contact. Direct communication. Invitations. Access. And access changes everything. Once access exists, boundaries matter more, not less. This is where timelines become fragile. Statements adjust. Explanations shift. Context changes depending on where it's being told. And whenever explanations start multiplying, clarity usually isn't increasing. It's being negotiated. The old news DFVLCTIO, and eventually, the conversation is dismissed. This is old. Why are people still talking about this? Everyone has moved on. But timelines don't expire just because someone says they should. If a story was never clearly closed, curiosity is not inappropriate. It's natural. Calling something old news isn't closure. It's avoidance. And avoidance doesn't kill questions. It fuels them. Part 1 core TRUTH. The end of part 1, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Claressa Shields is emotionally present. Papoose is strategically absent. One side explains. The other side benefits. One side feels. The other side waits, and waiting, when done long enough, becomes control. Silence doesn't just protect. It accumulates. The longer someone stays undefined, the more flexible their position becomes. They can lean into whichever narrative benefits them, avoid consequences, maintain emotional access, preserve optionality, and that's exactly where this story shifts. Because eventually, the guarded tone fades. What was once cautious becomes performative. Luxury enters the frame. Affection becomes visible. Praise is public. Joy is documented. And the message subtly changes. From, I don't need anything, to, look what I'm receiving. That contradiction matters because confidence doesn't require proof. Insecurity does. When gifts replace CLARTY, public generosity is not inherently wrong, but timing matters. When gifts appear after confusion, when visuals replace explanations, when affection becomes spectacle, it's rarely coincidence. Luxury becomes distraction. Affection becomes performance. Joy becomes validation. But validation is not clarity, and none of it answers the most important question: who is chosen when no one is watching? The power of Remy Ma. At one point, visual evidence appears. Then it disappears. No explanation, no correction, just deletion. Deletion is never random. You don't remove irrelevant content. You remove content that conflicts with the preferred narrative. Once something is removed, silence stops being calm. It becomes loud, because removal implies awareness. Awareness implies risk, and risk implies misalignment. 3 people, 3 STRATGIEs. By now, the roles are clear. Claressa Shields, emotional, expressive, defensive, invested RMY. And a quiet, disengaged, no public sparring, minimal response PAPOOC, undefined, silent, uncommitted in language. Protected by ambiguity, only one of these positions is safe. The emotionally invested person risks exposure. The disengaged person finds peace. The undefined person retains leverage. That's not romance. That's imbalance. Why silence always doubly awareness silence works? Because it avoids accountability, it preserves access, it allows interpretation, it costs nothing, you don't have to lie. You don't have to promise. You don't have to commit, you just let others assume. An assumption is where heartbreak is engineered. The hardest realization, the most painful truth here isn't betrayal. It's misalignment. Claressa Shields believed emotion would eventually force clarity. Papoose never offered clarity, because clarity requires sacrifice. And sacrifice was never on the table. So instead, silence was offered, presence was allowed, affection was accepted, commitment was withheld. That combination is devastating. Final verdict: analytical, not accusatory. This is not a story about villains. It's a story about power dynamics. About how silence can be weaponized politely, emotional labor can be outsourced, belief can be mistaken for being chosen. The lesson is simple and brutal. Being wanted is not the same as being chosen. And when someone never corrects the narrative, never defines the relationship, never clarifies the timeline, they are not confused. They are comfortable. Final T-style Salosin. If everything was clear, it wouldn't need this much explaining. If everything was over, nothing would need hiding. Silence didn't protect anyone here. It positioned someone. And by the time it becomes clear, the emotional cost has already been paid by the person who felt the most.